Yeah, it's going to work with every type of investor and no matter what business or structure they're doing in. Like this is the structure, right? This is the structure that the rich, sophisticated estate planning types of structures that people use because it provides the best protections, it provides the anonymity, it provides 360-degree coverage of like what types of scenarios can pop up. So then you'll have all of that, right? And the way that we do it is that to make it in a way that's going to be affordable for like the average person. So let's say if you look at just a typical structure like we talked about with this asset protection, right? With the hub and spoke model of the LLCs, right? You have all the individual LLCs, each LLC owns an asset. All of those LLCs are in turn owned by a single LLC. So they all channel up to the top of the pyramid, right? So to speak, right? And then the question is who owns that LLC? Well, that top of the pyramid LLC is actually in turn owned by your living trust, right? So your living trust actually owns all of your LLCs, right? So that way, when you die, it's actually your living trust that says, great, I actually own all these LLCs, so I can actually distribute all of the assets per the trust document of what's happening with all of the assets. And so then your goal during what we do it is we do it once a quarter. We meet with each one of our clients to do what we call like a compliance and strategy session. And in that, we go through, we walk through, great, well, let's clean up anything you've done over the last quarter and make sure that's all inside of either directly inside of your living trust or inside one of the underlying LLCs. So that way we can make sure that everything inside is inside of that triangle. Because if you want to act like rich people do, right? Rich people don't own anything, right? They have entities that own everything for them, right? You shouldn't own anything. Dwaine shouldn't own anything.
Welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing Podcast, your source for real-world strategies focused on creating long-term wealth, cash flow, and financial freedom through real estate. Through guidance, tips, and stories of highly successful real estate investors and thought leaders, we provide you the tools to succeed and to reach the lifestyle you always wanted. And now, your host, Dwaine Clarke.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing Show. This is your host, Dwaine Clarke. Today, another show, we have Scott Smit. Scott is an attorney. He is the founder and CEO of Royal Legal Solutions, specializing in asset protection, working exclusively with real estate agents, real estate investors. So that's really big. You have someone that's walking in our shoes and know exactly the needs that we need as real estate investors. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, Dwaine, I'm doing really well, man. I've really having a great day out here. I just actually got out of the Grand Canyon doing an overnight this weekend with like 5,000 feet of elevation. And, it's just a beautiful thing that the life of like being a real estate investor has been able to give me. Mm-hmm. And I love working with people all over the country now in all 50 states and every type of asset class on how can they use real estate investing and the right systems, the processes, the structures to be able to create that ideal lifestyle for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And it's good that you're getting out in the nature and things like that. So it's really good to hear that. So awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time. Noah Love, we kind of just gave a little quick snippet of your background, but would you mind kind of give us a run through of your background and how you got started in real estate as well as kind of your legal background?
Yeah, I mean, I got it started on the asset protection work that we do now because a friend of mine lost over $3 million from a single lawsuit. And that's when I really realized that, all the great things that I had built for myself could be easily taken away from me. So I had to really dive deep into how do I protect all of the real estate that I had built, because I was, buying real estate while I was practicing as a litigation attorney, suing insurance companies. Because come to find out that insurance companies are in a business where they collect premiums and deny coverage, right? And so a lot of times, and when major things happen, they leave you holding the bag like they did to my friend. And what that meant is that he lost a significant chunk of his portfolio, and it just about wiped him out. So that's when I realized, like, man, I need to do this for myself. And as I did it for myself, I was like, man, this is really complicated. There's a lot of moving parts here, from like, how do you do the tax planning? How do you do the entity structuring? How do you do the bookkeeping, the accounting? And then today, I think we're going to be focusing a lot on like the estate planning portion of this as well. So I founded Royal Legal Solutions with the intention of saying, I can help the average investor, that person that has like 2 to 10 properties, have the types of protections that billionaires would have, but to the average person in a way that's affordable for them to be able to do that. And that's really been my mission with working through Royal Legal Solutions over the last 6 years, and in building this company up to now to have about 30 employees, 2,000 clients in all 50 states.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely a big thing. And a lot of things that we don't think about as real estate investors, we think we're going to live on forever, pass the assets on to the kids, but it's really just kind of focusing on taking the time to talk to experts like yourself to really plan out the future, and where, wherever your portfolio, if either you sell it or you're going to pass it on to your heirs. Can we talk about kind of the process of estate planning for real estate investors? What are the benefits for it? And of course, asset protection goes hand in hand. And what are kind of some of the first steps of starting?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, especially like in the commercial space, right? They typically will have individual LLCs, one for each property, because that's how you have to acquire the property for all your financing, right? So this is typically referred to in an asset protection model as like a hub and spoke model, meaning that you have one LLC per property, and all those LLCs channel up into one LLC, right? So like that's your hub, is that one LLC, and then you can have the spokes just like a tire, and then all of your other LLCs like are around that circle, like where the tire would be at, right? Now that's your typical model. You're going to use that because it's going to streamline all of your taxes through a single LLC, and also compartmentalize all of your assets for protection, which is really what you need, right? You need every asset to be compartmentalized. So if somebody sues one asset, they can't go after any of the other assets, but you also need to be able to streamline your taxes, because otherwise you're paying too much for all of your CPA, all your CPA bills, right? Now that gets you through the protection side and some of the streamlining the tax side. But then the next critical piece that comes for us is, well, how do I make sure all of these assets are going to be passed, to my family? What happens after I'm done using these assets, right? And that's where we typically find like estate planning comes into play. When you talk about generational wealth building, that like, how can I take the stuff that I built and then make sure that goes to my family and it continues to build this legacy that I'm wanting to build? Because if you're like me, I feel like I've figured out a few things like through my life, and I want to be able to pass that down to my kids. And a great way to do that is through the way that you structure estate planning, so that they can benefit from all of the hard work that you've done in a way that's going to make sense. And that's really the big why behind estate planning, is to have those pieces in place. Now, to be clear, if you don't have any estate planning put in place, the government actually makes all of those decisions for you about what happens to your asset, who's take care of your kids, everything. The government decides all of that, right? Mm-hmm. So it is exceptionally important that if you're somebody that wants to be able to plan for the future, wants to plan for your family's future, that you have your estate planning in place. Because I don't know about you, but I don't trust the government to be able to run my family.
Exactly. So what be kind of this first step? Is it putting together a living trust, a will? What's that? And then for people who have wills, is there any modification that they need to in order to include all of the stuff that's, their portfolio and things like that?
Yeah. So when you look at what you need to actually have inside of your estate planning, like the worst thing you can do is have nothing, right? Because if you don't have anything put in place, then everything goes into the probate court, and the probate court, the government then decides what happens to all your assets. But it also, all of those assets then become public. So then everybody knows the full extent of the assets and who inherited them. So essentially you just put a target on the back of whoever just inherited the assets, right? Because when people want to know who to sue, right, they go sue the guy that has the money, right? They sue the guy that has the assets. That's why we're a big proponent of anonymity at Royal Legal Solutions. We believe that you should act just like rich people do. You shouldn't own anything, and everything should be held anonymously so people can't find out what you own, where it's at, or if they sue you, they can't get to it, because it's already inside entities that are anonymous entities, right? So if you have nothing at all, everything goes to the court. Everything's all exposed. It's all part of the public record. You create the target on the back of your family at that point, right? So one step above that, with the government actually deciding who gets what of your assets, right? I mean, isn't that crazy? Like the court will actually say who gets what of your assets. You don't actually get to make any of those choices if you don't have anything, right?
Yeah, you put all that hard work in, and then give up control right at the end, right?
Exactly. Yeah, right. So if you have a will in place, that's a little bit better, because now you still have to go through the court system. It's still all exposed and part of the public record. You still create the target on the back of whoever inherited those assets, but at least you get to decide who gets what and how they get it and when they get it, right? So you can control a little bit more of it, right? So a will is like a little baby step to be able to, in terms of like what's possible. The best thing you can do is actually what's called a living trust. So, because with a living trust, what you're able to do then is you hold all of your assets in your companies all underneath one trust structure. So you only have one document maintained. You can move assets and companies in and out of it any time. It's completely flexible. You can modify it at any time. And the best part about it is when you die, right, the trust itself bypasses the probate court. So you don't need to do anything with the probate court. There's no public disclosures of all of your assets. It all stays anonymous, right? You can control exactly how the assets go per what's detailed inside of the trust document that you craft with one of the attorneys and say, this is exactly how I want things to go. And it all and it's all being able to be controlled by you in any way that you wish. So you may say, hey, I want my kids to have some amount of money at 21, some at 25, some at 30. You might decide, hey, well, I actually want some of this money to stay in the trust over generations. So the work that I'm doing actually benefits my grandchildren. And I want to craft it in such a way that my kids will then be incentivized to contribute more to the trust. So we can build like a legacy that's surrounding that. Right. So, but the very minimum protections that you need is that living trust I put in place. And that's how you create the anonymity, you create the protection, you have all the control, and then it's 100% flexible.
And then what I was reading, a pour over will, what is that? And, what's the kind of benefits of that there?
Yeah. So you think of your living trust as something that it holds everything for you during your life, right? And it controls everything upon your death. What happens to like that shirt, or those watches or, something like that you're like, well, I didn't really put that inside of the trust. Like what does that go to? Well, that's something we say, well, let's just use what's called a pour over will. That's our catch-all. So anything that I didn't put explicitly into the trust, right? What I'm going to do then is the will say, great, take all of that and push that into the trust. And then distribute it in whatever way the trust says. So during our life, we want to take everything that we know about and we want to push it into a trust. But there's always a few dangling things that we haven't specifically named. And so that's when your pour over will is going to come in place and say, great, we're just going to scoop all that up, dump it into the trust, and then the trust will designate who's supposed to get what, on a percentage basis or whatever basis that you decide.
And as far as kind of that, I can see this, working very well for like active investors that, have a straight direct portfolio. What about for like a passive investor who owns like limited partnership shares in, multiple syndications? Can it work also in that same structure?
Yeah, it's going to work with every type of investor and no matter what business or structure they're doing in. Like this is the structure, right? This is the structure that the rich, sophisticated estate planning types of structures that people use because it provides the best protections. It provides the anonymity. It provides 360-degree coverage of like what types of scenarios can pop up. So then you'll have all of that, right? And the way that we do it is that to make it in a way that's going to be affordable for like the average person. So let's say if you look at just a typical structure, like we talked about with this asset protection, right? With the hub and spoke model of the LLCs, right? You have all the individual LLCs, each LLC owns an asset. All of those LLCs are in turn owned by a single LLC. So they all channel up to the top of the pyramid, right? So to speak, right? And then the question is who owns that LLC? Well, that top of the pyramid LLC is actually in turn owned by your living trust, right? So your living trust actually owns all of your LLCs, right? So that way, when you die, it's actually your living trust that says, great, I actually own all these LLCs, so I can actually distribute all of the assets per the trust document of what's happening with all of the assets. And so then your goal during what we do we do it once a quarter. We meet with each one of our clients to do what we call like a compliance and strategy session. And in that we go through, we walk through, great, well, let's clean up anything you've done over the last quarter and make sure that's all inside of either directly inside of your living trust or inside one of the underlying LLCs. So that way we can make sure that everything inside everything is inside of that triangle. Because if you want to act like rich people do, right? Rich people don't own anything, right? They have entities that own everything for them, right? You shouldn't own anything. Dwaine shouldn't own anything. Dwaine should be able to get in a car accident that's a horrific car accident, causes tons of damage, and everybody's really mad at him and they all want to sue Dwaine, and Dwaine says, I don't care, because you can sue me all day long, you're not getting to any of my stuff. It's all protected inside of this entity structure, and that entity structure is in turn wholly owned by the single living trust document. And then that single living trust document states that if anything happened to me, here's exactly where everything goes.
All right, awesome. Let's talk about like the common mistakes. I know I can see a lot of commercials where people say, "Hey, you can start your legal journey through these legal online forums, or you can fill out things and kind of do things yourself." I know just talking to an actual attorney, they definitely would be not recommend that at all. Can you also talk about some of these just kind of common mistakes that you see when setting up something like this?
Yeah. So if your choices are, hey, I'm not going to do anything at all, or I'm going to go buy something from like LegalZoom, right? I'd say go to LegalZoom, because doing something is better than nothing. Taking some action that's in the right direction, I'm always going to be encouraging of, right? But that's a really far cry from what does it actually take for things to be effective, right? So what we see like a lot of times is people would say, well, great, I set up a living trust, right? But I didn't maintain it correctly, so actually things have changed with how I think the assets should be divided among the children, because somebody has more needs than others, et cetera. And that document never gets updated, right? Or that people will buy new assets and then they never transfer them inside the living trust, because when you buy a new house or you buy a new property, right, your first thought isn't like, oh, I better make sure that my estate planning is right. It's just not the way people work. So we have people, every single person that's ever come into our door, we have pretty significant cleanup about like, okay, here's your structuring, right? Because the fun part of business is acquiring the assets. It's making the money. It's not all of the operational paperwork that comes in the back end, right? The reason that we do once a quarter meetings with clients is specifically because nobody really wants to do them, right? And it says, no. Our job is to watch over your back to make sure that you're doing everything correctly. And we're going to clean it up at least once a quarter, so everything stays like nice and tidy, and that you don't have to worry about it. Like, we're the ones that are going to worry about it, and we're the ones that are going to watch out for it to make sure that it's right. Because there's really just so many ways it can go wrong because of poor maintenance.
Yeah, that's definitely a big thing I've been hearing about is just the maintenance side. So meeting once a quarter with the attorney is definitely a big key. Yeah, I appreciate sharing. I know we can go like really deep in this topic alone, probably just talk about wills for like an hour. So we'll probably save that for another deep dive type of call. But just kind of learn a little bit more about your needs that you're take you're outdoors in nature. You've been freed and financially freed through real estate investing and helping investors all over the country. Can you take us through a typical workday for you, and do you have any special morning routines?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that I want to emphasize, like with that, Dwayne, is that money wasn't the freedom for me into it. What was actually, it had to be money plus operational simplicity and the right team of people that were around me is what it really took to really be free from it, right? I mean, I've been free for a long time, and I do Royal Legal as merely because of a passion. It's the biggest impact I think I can have on the world is being able to help other people achieve the kind of freedom that I did, right? But instead of going out there and say like, hey, this is how you can make the most amount of money, it's no. Here's actually how you run your life correctly. Here's how you run your business correctly, because otherwise you end up being rich, but you have golden handcuffs, right? I think you've heard of that before, right? So the reason that you have golden handcuffs is because you have poor operations. So everything is continually draining on your time. So that's really the crux of like what Royal Legal is about. And that really bleeds over in that same kind of thinking into my personal life, right? I think of everything as like an operation, right, that I need to do for one thing or another. So I'm a huge proponent of what's called the miracle morning, right, where you take that first 2 hours of each of your morning, and that 2 hours of each one of your days is your time. It's that part of your day that you put yourself first to say that I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything for Dwaine that Dwaine needs, right? And then I'm going to get to everything else that's out there in the world, from my emails, everything else that's going on, right? And the impact of that is not a small impact. It's a monumental change. And it's also incredibly difficult. We've been conditioned to think that our value is demonstrated by our ability to influence other people's lives, right? So we're constantly looking at how can I give more value to others? But if you switch that and say, well, how can I give more value to myself each day? And how can I do that inside of this, 2-hour block with it? One, it's hard to do that. I mean, when I first started, I can only do like 10, 15 minutes at a time of it. And then I was like, I have to go do something else, right? And it took a whole new way of learning to be like, hey, can I really focus on what is I need? But what I found was that by taking those 2 hours and giving to myself first during that 2 hours, doing like my meditation, journaling, reading, whatever the things are that are coming up for me that week that I need to do for myself, that gave me a higher level of energy and a higher level of mental acuity. in just a different state of being. I don't really know a way to describe it besides that bled over into all the parts of my day. And I was more effective in negotiations, helping my employees, like everything from start to finish just became way easier. So now I talk about it and say, if you really want to do things the hard way, work really hard. Like wake up right in the morning and then just grind all day until you can't work anymore, and then like pass out, and then do that all again and do that 6 days in a row. Maybe take a day off. If you want to do things the really easy way, take 2 hours out of each day, give that to yourself first, right? And then work to the extent that you can really check into yourself to say, hey, listen, that's my breaking point of this day today. And then I'm going to go use the rest of this day to recover. And then I'm going to come back the next day, because nobody wins this game in a sprint. You win it by having consistency. And then the best version of yourself on a consistent basis is much more effective than the 50% version of yourself working your ass off.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. And you had mentioned, because with your team, you got 20, 30 employees. I'm pretty sure you guys have like some systems and operational stuff in place. Can you take us through some of the systems and tools that help you guys be more effective?
I mean, really for us, it's just making sure that we're always making sure that we have the highest version of quality, right? So we're a quality first organization. And what that means is that we can look at anybody that comes into our door, right? And what we did is we said, well, great, what's the best possible outcome for this person as they come in, right? And how do we know what the best possible outcome should look like? So we do a really thorough job of on the front end of really screening who's going to be the right fit for us, and then saying, well, once we can know who's going to be the right fit for us, we have enough data points to know here's the types of solutions that this person is going to need. So from very early on, by having like a streamlined process of really thinking through, like, okay, what does a great candidate for a new client look like? Then we can actually streamline everything else to be very predictive for us. And I would encourage that for everybody. You should really be able to know really early on in any new business deal that you're doing, any new real estate deal that you're doing, any type of client that you're serving, you should have enough insight into what does a great opportunity look like for you that you can really have a big win. And you should be able to know precisely with objective data on what that's going to be. So that way you can know, okay, here's how I can dramatically change that person's life for the better, or I can make a really big hit home run of a deal. If you don't have clarity on what that looks like on the front end, then you're just taking guesses and then hoping you're going to get it right.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I like that a lot. And with like, so you're doing like the miracle morning and all of that stuff where you're kind of just thinking, about a lot of stuff. What can you say that you're most grateful for?
Yeah. So the things that I'm actually most grateful for is my health. Without my health, like I wouldn't be able to go out into the Grand Canyon, and be able to do these adventures that you can't buy, literally, right, into it. So I think every day that I get through, like, I'm really, really grateful that I have, stellar, just a stellar physical ability to be able to go do that, and still have like the health of 35 to be able to be that active into it. And also realizing in that these aren't sacrifices, that like the times that I'm really focusing on my health and focusing on getting outdoors and that kind of stuff, realizing that these are actually synergies that help me make more money, to be able to be a better business person, to show up stronger for people's lives, and that I used to think it was all just the one way. It was how hard I was working and how hard I was grinding, like the Gary V way. And what I realized is like, oh, that's totally off the mark. I mean, if you can do that, awesome, good for you, and I hope you're not miserable, but I bet you are, but there's actually a way that you can actually have all of the things you want if you think through it and you can work through the process as well enough, right? We just work through that on the financial and business and financial freedom side of that, but the same things that help you accomplish great financial freedom, that make you a great business person, make you a great investor, and have that over the long term, are the same kinds of thinking that will make you a great individual. And so I really strongly believe that we really can have it all, and we really can do all the things.
Very well said. I appreciate that. So we'll make sure to have all of your contact information and show notes. Everyone can check it out, click it, give a call. Can you please share how we get in touch with you?
Yeah, best thing to do is actually just go to the royallegalsolutions.com website and click the take a quiz link at the top of the page. That'll take you to a page to fill out a quiz. Like, just gives us the basic information we need to be able to really have a productive first conversation. My goal is to be able to always give you, without ever giving us any money, to be able to pair you with, like, here's all of the best content that we have, and also here's all the best practices that we see for people that are just like you, right? So if you just go to royallegalsolutions.com and you click the take a quiz or get a price link at the top of the page and fill out that quiz, what you're going to get from that is all of our best stuff for exactly who you are for the other clients that we've helped like you. And then if it makes sense for us to be able to build out this infrastructure for you, then great. We're going to be able to have like that type of relationship. If you just want the information of like, hey, what are the best people in my industry or from my area doing from these guys that are dealing with these investors every single day and learning from these investors every single day, it's a great way to get an insider look of like what's happening in the marketplace and what are the best people doing.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to include that. But Scott, it was a pleasure having you on the call. Like I said, we can get really deep into this type of topic, and we may have you back and kind of discuss other topics as well. But Scott, I really appreciate it. Best to you and the family. Have a great Christmas and a new year, and we'll look forward to connecting again soon.
Thanks, Dwaine. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Take care, my friend.